previous interviews, you said that as you were going to Thailand and even as you were at the cave, that you thought there was a 0% chance of the rescue working. Now, what about it made seem so impossible, specifically?
Yeah, I mean, it's a question I've been asked a lot, and people, wonder, did I genuinely believe that those children couldn't survive the crazy idea that we had to anaesthetize them and bring them out underwater? And 4 years has passed, and because now obviously I know the operation was a success, and I actually can explain in my own mind why it worked when I thought that it wouldn't. It's become almost part of my memory that, well, maybe I didn't really believe that it couldn't work, but I honestly at the time didn't think it could work, and there were a number of reasons for that. And I don't think you have to be an anaesthetist or a cave diver to think to yourself, well, if I'm going to render someone unconscious with an anesthetic, put them underwater for 3 hours, they're not going to be alive at the other end of that. So,
Yeah.
and there were some very specific reasons that I was worried. And the first one was that the mask that we were planning to use for them, this full face mask, which would seal all the way around your face. Obviously, if you've done any snorkeling or diving at all, you would know that if you're asleep, you can't hold something in your mouth. So we had to have a way of sealing their and protecting their airway from the water. But I'd used those full face masks quite a bit in the past, and I had found that water does get into them, and slowly but surely they would fill up with water unless, as a diver, you took active steps to clear the water out, which of course you do.
Right.
So I was very worried that over 3 hours that water would enter the mask, and it only takes a very small amount of water in front of your mouth to drown you. So that was my biggest concern. The second thing is that if you've done a first aid course, you know that if someone's unconscious, you have to protect their airway, maybe hold their chin up or push their jaw forward, stop their tongue falling back. And, we're taught to put people on their side in the recovery position to protect their airway. And so I thought at some stage over 3 hours, if you're unconscious and you don't have an expert there to look after the airway will surely become obstructed at some point and the kids will suffocate. And if those two things didn't kill them, then I was sure that the water temperature would be low enough to make them dangerously hypothermic. And because normally our body temperature is about 37 and the water temperature is only 23, so surely their temperature will sag down towards 23 and they'll die from that alone. And that's particularly a problem under anesthesia, that your temperature can drop unless you actively warm the patient. So between those three things and about 100 other things that I was worried about, I thought there's no possible way this can work.
Right, right. And then what was the method of monitoring them during the cave? Because you imagine an anaesthetist in the hospital has a bunch of screens telling them what's going on, but can't imagine
Exactly.
that happen underwater.
No, well, that's right. And look, I have worked in environments where you can't monitor your patients as thoroughly as you would in an operating theatre. And what you've described is obviously correct. You're in a well-lit area, you've got an expert assistant with you, you've got all the tools and tricks up your sleeve, the lights are on, you can see your patient, and the room's not full of water. So it's a lot easier and safer in the operating theatre. So, but I have worked in places like in developing countries like Vanuatu, where I've worked in remote locations doing operations on people just with a pulse oximeter, the little peg on your finger,
Mhm.
just to tell you what your oxygen level is. And, it can be done, but obviously the safety is much, much less. And of course, in the cave, there's no monitoring, not even that pulse oximeter. We can't even see our patient underwater because there's no visibility. So the only thing we could do was really hold the buoy close to our chest, feel their breathing with their hands, hear and feel the bubbles coming out of the face mask, and just monitor their respiration and feel if they start to move and obviously start to wake up.
Okay, so a 3-hour cave dive, it seems like you'd have to have quite a good control of yourself and maintaining calmness and keeping the pressure down. How did you manage to do that? Is that from experience with cave diving or other
Yeah,
experience?
that's exactly right. I've been doing, I started cave diving in 1986, so I've had a bit of practice now. And you probably wouldn't persist with a sport like this unless you enjoyed it and found that ability to stay calm when inevitably small problems arise from time to time. So whether you do rock climbing or cave diving or big wave surfing or anything that where there's an element of danger, you have to learn to manage the risks, obviously, and keep yourself safe, which is always the first priority, but also learn how to control your emotions when things start to go wrong a little bit, because if you do panic, there's no possible way to escape the cave. You can't, if you're diving in open water on a nice tropical reef, you can just go straight to the surface if something goes wrong. And whilst that's a bit dangerous, the chances are you'll be fine. In a cave, you can't go up because the rock is there. So you have to go out before you can go up. So you need to be able to be very self-sufficient and control your emotions and keep panic at bay for as long as possible. And you just develop that with experience.
And then in my head, I sort of, hearing about the cave dives on the news, it sort of seemed like everything went to plan, especially as you were coming back out. Was that true? Or was there some things that went a bit awry that required a greater sense of calmness and keeping pressure at
Oh,
bay?
there were plenty of problems. I think everyone just assumes that, well, the boys will survive, so everything was really smooth sailing. But actually, there were some very near misses, both with the boys and with the divers themselves. So a couple of examples. On the first day, the last boy that Rick Stanton took out, I think he had a chest infection, and he was very small, and maybe I gave him a bit too much anesthetic. And his breathing rate just went down and down and down until he was only breathing about 3 times a minute.
Oh,
And
wow.
normally we breathe sort of 12 to 20 times a minute. And just before Rick disappeared underwater with him, he called back to me and said, "Harry, this kid's barely breathing." So I said, just count the respirations and call them out to me when he breathes. And so we were counting, and it was literally about 3 times in a minute.
Oh, wow.
And I thought, well, that's a bit scary. So what are we going to do? And I realized, well, there's nothing I can do for that boy. I've got no other equipment to help resuscitate him or anything. So I said to Rick, you just got to go and get through to the next dry chamber where Craig was waiting, who would be able to help. Craig's a vet, so he can resuscitate a dog. I'm sure he can resuscitate a small boy. So I quickly got my gear on as fast as I could, and I chased Rick through. And when I arrived in the next chamber, which was about a 20-minute dive through that first section, Rick and Craig had pulled that boy up onto the sand bank, and the boy was just blue and not breathing at all. And I was just about to start mouth to mouth on him, and I just thought I'll just make sure his airway is clear. So I did that jaw thrust maneuver where you push their jaw forwards to bring their tongue forward. It's actually quite painful as well, so it's a good stimulus to make someone breathe if they're just sort of on the cusp of being able to. And that was enough to actually make him take a big breath. And then he started to breathe quite regularly. And in fact, within a few minutes, he needed another dose of anesthetic. And that's the way he just behaved up and down like that the whole way out. So poor Rick had a pretty scary time with him. So there were episodes like that, and I think the boys, some of them were pretty lucky to survive.
And then I guess due to that success, you became overnight national heroes and then Australian of the Year. How did you find that experience? Was it all at once? Was it pretty great? You get an extra coffee or something?
I was pretty horrified. I'm not going to lie. I didn't enjoy it initially, all this kind of attention. And, I'm just a normal person. I was just doing my job. I accept that I've got a slightly unusual hobby, but a lot of people have weird hobbies, and it was just strange that this particular event required these particular skills. So when we came home from Thailand, we didn't really realize how big this story had become. We didn't realize that it had become a global phenomenon, and that we were kind of at the center of it, myself and Craig and these British divers and the Thai Navy SEALs. And it was a bit embarrassing, to be honest, because we felt like we were just one small part of this enormous international team. I mean, there were upwards of 10,000 people involved in this rescue in or around that mountain. And to have all this attention just on us at that stage was embarrassing. And I didn't trust the media. I had no experience with the media. And, you watch those current affairs shows on telly with someone chasing someone down the road with a camera and a microphone saying, what have you done, what have you done? That was what I was worried about with the media. So I kind of hid away from it as long as possible, and so did Craig. In fact, we went on these cave expeditions almost intentionally to kind of escape it all. But then when we were nominated for the Australian of the Year award, it seemed like, wow, it's a bit churlish to continue to behave like this, maybe, you know, and especially once we won the award, we realized that this is a very prestigious thing and it was a massive honor. So we felt like, well, we need to engage now and try and give something back. So I had to really change my attitude at that point. And I have to say, subsequently, it's been an amazing experience, you know, a great honor, and the chance to, you know, talk to all these amazing people and to talk to a lot of schools, you know, people like yourself, and share this experience and try and inspire young people, especially to, you know, I know it's a cliche, but to be the best that you can be. Because, you know, when I was at school, when I was your age, I was a pretty awkward sort of boy. I didn't really fit in quite, you know, anywhere, and I was no good at team sports, and I had to work pretty hard to achieve good grades at school. So I wasn't really outstanding at anything, but I was just very lucky that I found this one passion, which was the ocean and diving, and, you know, I love fish and all that stuff. So, you know, to have something in my life that actually rewarded, if you like, that obsession, that passion of mine, was amazing opportunity. And I'm very grateful, really, that the whole thing happened in the end.
Absolutely. That's really interesting, the passion coming at the fore.
Yeah. So I guess my message,
like
you know, to young
yeah.
people is, if you're lucky enough to have one thing, and it doesn't matter whether it's tiddlywinks or chess or Warcraft, or, you know, you're an amazing athlete, or, you know, a genius intellect, if you're lucky to be good at one thing or love one thing, you know, you are indeed lucky, and you should just pursue it with all your heart, because, well, as you can see in my case, you never quite know where it's going to lead.
Yeah. I think that's a really good note to end on, and I wanted to say thank you for your time. Thank you for speaking.
All right, thank you, Em.